Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the Middle Ages where life is tough and survival is even tougher. Imagine yourself waking up in a world without electricity plumbing, or even the faintest idea of modern medicine. The air is thick with smoke from hearth fires, and the streets are a muddy labyrinth of bustling activity. A barking dog snaps you out of your daze and a distant bell tolls, signaling the start of another day. Now, don't get too cozy. Medieval life is not for the faint of heart. Spoiler alert. You probably won't survive this, but before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the muffled clatter of hooves and wooden wheels on the uneven dirt road outside. The scent of baked bread briefly fills your nose, mingling with the not-so-pleasant odor of livestock. The first rays of sunlight filter through the small glazed opening of your hut, a luxury most villagers wouldn't dare dream of. Your home, a simple wattle and daub structure, feels damp. The floor beneath your straw mattress is packed earth, and every creak from the wooden beams overhead reminds you just how fragile this shelter truly is. You stretch only to realize your shoulders ache, a testament to yesterday's labor in the fields. Outside the village is alive. Chickens dart across paths. Children chase each other and merchants unload goods onto rickety carts. Villagers greet one another with nods, their voices punctuated by the occasional bark of a mangy dog. This isn't some quaint fairy tale setting. It's a working community and every second counts. The local blacksmith hammers away at his forge, sending sparks into the air. His work isn't just about tools and horseshoes, it's the lifeline of the village. Farmers depend on his plows, and the lord of the manor relies on his weapons. The clang of metal is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, but you don't have time to linger. You shuffle to the communal well. Drawing water isn't a casual task here. The bucket is heavy, and the rope burns your palms. There's a subtle metallic taste to the water, a reminder that purification is non-existent. As you walk back, a pig trots past, narrowly avoiding a man with a cart full of dung. He mutters curses under his breath, and you sidestep the cart just in time. Hygiene isn't a priority here, and the mud caked on your boots is far from ordinary. It's a concoction of earth, animal waste, and who knows what else. The village is overseen by the manor house on the hill, its thatched roof and timber frame standing slightly apart from the rest. It's not a castle, but it represents authority. The Lord controls everything here, your land, your labor, even your time. And that church bell you heard earlier, it's a reminder of another authority looming over your life. The parish church, modest but towering, sites at the heart of the village. Its stained glass windows glint in the sun, a stark contrast to the earthy tones of your surroundings. Religion isn't just a part of life, it is life. Every festival, every meal, every labor is dictated by the church calendar. It's comforting to some, but oppressive to others, though you wouldn't dare voice such thoughts aloud. As the day unfolds, the village square becomes a hive of activity. Stalls appear as if by magic, selling everything from salted fish to rough-spun wool. The air is thick with a blend of enticing and revolting smells, freshly baked pies alongside barrels of fermenting ale. You overhear a heated exchange between two merchants arguing over the price of onions. Suddenly, a commotion draws your attention. A boy no older than 10 is being dragged to the stocks by two burly men. He's accused of stealing an apple. The punishment isn't severe by medieval standards. He'll spend a few hours with his hands and head locked in the wooden contraption, subject to jeers and rotten vegetables. But you can't help but feel a pang of pity. As the sun rises higher, the noise of the village grows. It's a sensory overload, and the harsh realities of life are impossible to ignore. There's a strange beauty in the simplicity of it all, but beneath the surface lies an unrelenting struggle. You pause to catch your breath, leaning against the side of a barn. The smell of hay and manure is overpowering. A few villagers nod at you in passing, their faces worn but kind. It's hard to tell if their smiles are genuine or just a force of habit, a way to cope with the relentless demands of this life. In the distance, a hawker shouts, advertising his wares. Fine knives sharper than a knight's sword. You doubt his claim but appreciate the effort. This is medieval marketing at its finest. As you take it all in, a strange thought occurs to you. There's no going back. This isn't a theme park, it's your reality. And whether you like it or not, you'll have to find your place in this harsh, unforgiving world. Morning breaks much like the day before, with the faint light of dawn filtering through your small window. The air is crisp and carries the earthy smell of dew settling on the fields. But there's something different about today. A palpable tension hangs in the air. As you step outside, villagers are already gathered in small clusters, their voices low and uncertain. A messenger from the manor arrived at dawn, summoning everyone to the village square for an important announcement. The village square buzzes with nervous energy. Farmers wipe their calloused hands on their tunics while women clutch their shawls tighter against the chill. Children, sensing the unease of their parents, cling silently to their sides. Overhead, the cawing of crows adds an eerie undertone to the scene. The Lord Steward, a wiry man with a face like weathered parchment, stands on a raised wooden platform. His embroidered tunic sets him apart from the rest of you, a reminder of his elevated status. He unrolls a scroll with deliberate precision, the parchment crackling as he clears his throat. By order of his lordship, he begins his voice cold and formal, as an additional levy is hereby imposed to fund the repairs of the manor's defenses. A collective groan ripples through the crowd, though no one dares to speak too loudly. The Lord's taxes are already a heavy burden. This new levy feels like the breaking point. The steward ignores the unrest and continues reading. Furthermore, all able-bodied men are required to report to the manor grounds by week's end to assist with construction. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach. Not only will the additional tax strain the village's resources, but the demand for labor means fields will go untended and families will struggle even more to survive. Around you, villagers exchange anxious glances, muttering their frustrations in hushed tones. One older man steps forward, his weathered face a mask of quiet defiance. "We can barely scrape by as it is," he says, his voice steady but respectful. "If we give more, our families will starve." The steward's eyes narrow, his thin lips curling into a sneer. "His lordship is generous enough to allow you to keep what little you have." He replies sharply, "Do not test his patience." The man retreats into the crowd, his shoulders slumping in defeat. You feel a pang of sympathy for him and a growing sense of dread. The steward finishes his proclamation and steps down from the platform, leaving the villagers to process the news. Slowly, the square begins to empty as people return to their homes or fields, their faces etched with worry. By midday, the news has spread like wildfire. Everywhere you go, people are talking about the new levy. The blacksmith's hammer strikes the anvil with more force than usual, his frustration evident in each swing. At the well, women pause their gossip to discuss how they'll make ends meet. Even the children, usually oblivious to such matters, sense the tension and play more quietly than usual. You find yourself drawn into a conversation with a group of farmers near the edge of the village. One of them, a burly man named Thomas, voices what everyone else is thinking. "If we keep giving, there won't be anything left. And what happens when the next levy comes?" A younger man, Simon, nods in agreement. "It's not just the taxes. Losing the men for labor will ruin us. The fields won't tend themselves. The conversation turns to darker topics. What if someone were to stand up to the Lord? Could the villagers band together and refuse to comply? But these ideas are quickly dismissed as foolish. The Lord has soldiers, and the punishment for defiance is severe. Even the boldest among you knows that rebellion would only bring more suffering. As the afternoon wears on, you notice a subtle shift in the village's rhythm. Tasks that once felt mundane now carry an undercurrent of desperation. A woman at the river scrubs clothes with a vigor that seems almost frantic, her lips moving in silent prayer. An older man sharpens his scythe, his expression grim. It's as if everyone is trying to prepare for an uncertain future, clinging to their routines as a source of stability. By evening, the village square is nearly empty. The usual hum of activity has been replaced by an uneasy stillness. You find yourself drawn back to the platform where the steward had delivered his grim announcement. It seems absurd that such a small piece of wood could hold so much power over your lives. A soft voice interrupts your thoughts. Do you think it will ever end? You turn to see a young woman, her face illuminated by the fading light of the setting sun. She's carrying a basket of herbs, likely gathered for the midwife. Her question hangs in the air, heavy with doubt and resignation. You shake your head, unsure of what to say. The truth is, you don't know if things will ever change. The Lord's demands feel like an endless cycle, each one chipping away at the fragile balance of village life. As darkness falls, families gather in their homes for supper. The meals are simple stews made from root vegetables and scraps of meat, accompanied by coarse bread. Conversation is subdued, and the usual laughter of children is notably absent. Outside, the stars begin to appear, their brilliance undimmed by the smoke of hearth fires. You sit with your own family, the warmth of the fire providing a small measure of comfort. As you eat, you can't help but think about the days ahead. How will the village cope with the new demands? Will anyone dare to resist? The evening passes slowly, the weight of the day's events pressing down on everyone. Eventually, you find yourself lying on your straw mattress, staring at the wooden beams above. The familiar creaks and groans of the house are oddly soothing, a reminder that some things remain constant, even in times of upheaval. As sleep begins to claim you, your thoughts drift to the faces of the villagers, the blacksmith, the farmers, the children. Despite their struggles, there's a quiet strength in each of them, a resilience born from centuries of enduring hardship. It's this strength, you realize, that will carry them through the challenges ahead. The dawn sneaks in again, but today it carries a new kind of weight. You wake to the distant sounds of men gathering, their voices low but resolute, like the muted rumble of a brewing storm. The Lord's summons hangs heavy in your mind as you prepare yourself today. Some of the village's strongest will be taken to labor on the manor's defenses, and the uncertainty of their return casts a shadow over everything. You step outside into the chill morning air. The village is quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. Children's laughter is replaced by nervous whispers, and the usual bustle slows to a reluctant shuffle. The fields where you know crops are already struggling under the hot sun seem to droop further, as if burdened by the weight of human worry. The men assemble near the edge of the village, forming a ragged line before the manor gates. Among them is Thomas, the burly farmer you met yesterday, his face set in grim determination. You catch Simon's eye, too, the younger man who spoke about the looming disaster of empty fields. Neither meets your gaze, but you sense their thoughts are as heavy as your own. The steward appears again, clipboard in hand, barking orders that cut through the morning's uneasy quiet. Line up, no stragglers. This labor is your duty to the Lord. His tone leaves no room for argument, and the men obey, subdued but simmering with resentment. As they march away, you watch from the square, feeling a mix of pride and helplessness. Pride because these men are the backbone of your village stepping up despite the odds. Helplessness because their absence will ripple through every corner of your world. Back in the village, life doesn't pause for long. The women take on double the work tending the fields as best they can while managing household chores. You join a small group helping to harvest a field of barley, your hands raw from pulling the stubborn stalks. The sun blisters your neck and the dust settles in your throat, but you push on. While you work, an elderly woman nearby hums an old folk tune, a melody that seems to carry the memories of generations past. Her voice is cracked but steady, weaving through the heat and toil. There's something comforting in that song, a reminder that life goes on despite hardship. This brings to mind an odd medieval fact. During long workdays like this, villagers often chewed on herbs or pine resin, not for taste but to dull hunger and keep their mouths busy. A little bizarre, sure, but practical when food was scarce and breaks were rare. Historians still argue whether this practice was common across all regions or just a localized survival trick. Either way, you decide you'd rather skip that one. As noon approaches, you find yourself at the village well drawing water with a heavy bucket. The rope slips slightly and you grip it tighter, feeling the burn on your palms. Nearby, a small group is gathered around a traveling merchant, a rare visitor with exotic spices, fabrics, and trinkets. You wander closer, curious. The merchant's face is weather-beaten, and his clothes are colorful, almost theatrical compared to the muted tones of the villager's garb. He claims to have come from the far reaches of the continent, speaking of cities with towering stone walls and markets overflowing with goods from distant lands. Though most of what he says feels like fantasy, his wares are real vials of saffron, jars of honey, and bright scarves that catch the sun's light. Some villagers eye his goods hungrily, imagining how such luxuries might brighten their grim lives. Others remain skeptical, clutching their coins tightly. You overhear the merchant boast. In my travels, I've seen people live in houses with glass windows and even light bulbs, powered by something called electricity. The crowd falls silent for a moment, then bursts into laughter. Sounds like wizardry to me, an old man chuckles. You can't help but smile at the thought. Electricity glass windows. The future sounds like a fairy tale. By mid-afternoon, the sun is relentless, and you find shade under a large oak tree near the village edge. A group of children plays nearby their game, a crude imitation of knightly battles, wielding sticks as swords. Their laughter is bright but fleeting, a rare burst of light in a day weighed down by responsibility. You watch a little girl no older than 6 carefully picking wildflowers and weaving them into a makeshift crown. Her mother calls from a distance, urging her to return home before the sun sets. There's an innocence here that feels fragile against the backdrop of the village's hardships. This moment brings to mind a curious medieval tidbit. Children weren't just playthings of their parents' time. They often had chores from a very young age, sometimes as young as 3 or 4. In some regions, children as young as 7 could be sent to apprenticeships, learning trades to help their families survive. It's a stark contrast to the modern concept of childhood as a carefree time. Historians still debate how universally this applied and what emotional toll it took on the youngest villagers. As the afternoon fades, you head toward the village church, a small but sturdy stone building that stands as the spiritual heart of the community. The scent of incense and burning candles drifts through the air, mingling with the faint murmur of prayers. Inside, the priest prepares for evening mass, his hands steady as he arranges the altar. He offers a nod as you enter, a quiet gesture that carries weight in this tight-knit community. Religion is not just a comfort, it's a framework that orders daily life, offering hope and discipline. But it can also be a source of fear and control. You remember that in medieval times, church leaders often wielded as much power as the lords themselves. They collected tithes, enforced moral codes, and sometimes even dictated who could marry or inherit property. The line between spiritual guidance and political authority was blurry, and historians still argue how much this helped or hindered ordinary people. The evening draws near, and with it comes the village's nightly ritual, gathering around communal fires or hearths to share stories. Tonight you join a circle where the elder recounts tales of past famines, heroic deeds, and mysterious happenings that have become legend. His voice is low and rhythmic, weaving a tapestry of history and myth. You hear about knights who fought not just with swords but with cunning, about witches whose magic could heal or harm, about travelers who vanished into the woods never to be seen again. The flickering firelight casts dancing shadows that seem to bring the stories alive. One story sticks with you, a tale of a knight who legend says was buried with a treasure map sewn into his cloak. For centuries, treasure hunters have sought it, but none have succeeded. You wonder if some secrets of the Middle Ages are meant to remain hidden. As the night deepens, the fire's warmth draws you into a quiet trance. You notice how the villagers lean in close, their faces lit by the glow, sharing not just stories, but a collective resilience. It's a reminder that even in the harshest times, human connection provides a refuge. Finally, you return to your hut, tired but strangely comforted by the day's unfolding. The distant hoot of an owl accompanies your thoughts as you settle down. The steward's levy, the men's labor, the children's laughter, the elders' stories, they form a complex mosaic of medieval life, far from the simple caricature of knights and castles. Before sleep claims you, a thought lingers despite the hardship. Despite the taxes and toil this village endures, it endures because people choose to keep going day after day, finding small moments of joy and solidarity. That might be the true magic of the Middle Ages survival, not just as individuals, but as a community bound by shared fate. The following morning dawns cold and gray, the kind of day that seeps into your bones and makes every movement feel heavier. The village is quieter than usual, an uneasy calm hanging over the fields and cottages. You wake with a knot in your stomach, knowing that today will test the very limits of everyone's endurance. The men who were conscripted to work on the manor's defenses have been gone for several days now. Their absence is a heavy weight pressing on the community. The fields are less tended, the harvest slower. The women and children do what they can, but it's clear the village's rhythm has been thrown off balance. You sense the worry spreading like wildfire. As you step outside, you see several villagers gathered near the village well. They speak in hushed tones, casting anxious glances toward the road that leads to the manor. Rumors have begun to circulate stories of accidents at the construction site, of harsh punishments for those who falter, even of disappearances. You overhear one woman whisper, "Did you hear about John? He fell from the scaffolding last week. They sent him home, but he's barely able to walk." Another responds, "And old Henry, they say he was whipped for resting too long. It's inhumane." These snippets chill you to the bone. You join the group, sharing the collective dread. The manor, once a distant symbol of authority, now feels like a looming threat, casting a dark shadow over your lives. The steward's earlier proclamations seem harsher in hindsight. What once felt like a distant burden is now a crushing reality. The day unfolds with a sense of urgency. The village elder calls a meeting in the square, his weathered face grim as he addresses the crowd. "We must find ways to support those working for the Lord," he says, voice steady but filled with concern. "If they falter, the entire village suffers." A plan is proposed. The villagers will rotate duties to tend to the fields left unattended and send supplies to the men at the manor. It's a difficult balance, taking from a community already stretched thin, but there is no other choice. Survival demands sacrifice. You volunteer to help deliver a bundle of food and tools to the laborers of the manor. As you prepare for the journey, you are struck by how different your role feels from that of the men who left. Your task seems smaller, yet every small act feels vital in this precarious situation. The path to the manor is rough and winding, cutting through dense woods and rocky terrain. As you walk, your thoughts wander to the harsh realities of medieval travel. Roads were often little more than dirt tracks, muddy and treacherous after rain. Bandits were a constant threat, and inns were rare and unreliable. You recall reading that many travelers preferred to journey in groups for safety, and that carrying weapons was not just common, but necessary. This journey feels more dangerous than it looks, and you stay alert, clutching your bundle tightly. The manor itself rises before you, a stark contrast to the humble village homes. Its stone walls are thick and imposing, designed to withstand attacks both from without and within. The men working on the defenses look exhausted, their faces etched with dirt and pain. You call out to Thomas and Simon, who recognize you with weary smiles. They are grateful for the supplies, but their eyes betray the physical toll of their labor. It's harder than we imagined, Thomas admits. The Lord expects results fast no matter the cost. Simon nods in agreement, and the steward's temper grows sharper by the day. Mistakes aren't tolerated. You spend a few moments talking, sharing news from the village and offering what comfort you can. Then you bid them farewell, promising to return with more supplies soon. On your way back, the sky darkens and a sudden storm breaks loose. You scramble for cover under a dense canopy of trees, but the rain soaks you through in minutes. The path becomes slippery and you nearly lose your footing several times. This experience reminds you how vulnerable medieval people were to the forces of nature. There were no modern weather forecasts or protective gear, just instinct, experience, and a lot of luck. A bad storm could destroy crops, flood homes, or make travel impossible for days. When you finally reach the village, soaked and weary, the sight of familiar faces and warm fires feels like a balm. The villagers gather to share news and check on one another, their shared hardships forging a deep bond. That evening, you attend a small gathering in the largest cottage where several women have come together to prepare herbal remedies. The village midwife leads the session, her hands deft, as she grinds dried plants into powders and brews tinctures. She explains the uses of various herbs: willow bark for pain, chamomile for calming nerves, and nettle for strengthening the blood. Her knowledge is a precious resource passed down through generations. You realize how crucial such traditional medicine was, especially when access to trained doctors was nearly impossible for peasants. The midwife's remedies could ease suffering and sometimes save lives, but they were no match for serious infections or injuries. You ask about the dangers of childbirth, and she nods gravely. Many mothers and babies do not survive, she admits. We do what we can, but the risks are high. It's a sobering reminder of the fragility of life in the Middle Ages, especially for women whose reproductive roles place them in constant danger. Later, as you sit by the fire, you reflect on the day's events. The weight of responsibility on the village is immense, but so is the resilience of its people. Despite the hardships, there's a fierce determination to endure, to protect one another, and to find hope in small acts of kindness. You think about the steward's harsh words and the Lord's demands, but also about the quiet strength in the eyes of the villagers. The women managing fields, the midwife tending the sick, the elder guiding the community. This balance between oppression and resilience defines medieval life in a way that no textbook can fully capture. It's not just about castles and battles, it's about the everyday struggle for survival and dignity. As sleep finally claims you, the distant howl of a wolf echoes through the night. It's a reminder that beyond the village, wildness still reigns, a force of nature as indifferent and relentless as the man-made hardships within. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new tests of strength and spirit. But for now, you rest wrapped in the fragile warmth of a community that refuses to give up. The sun rises slowly, casting a pale light over the village as dawn breaks through a veil of mist. The cold morning air feels sharp in your lungs, and the ground beneath your feet is still damp from the previous night's rain. You notice a few villagers already stirring, moving about with the familiar rhythm of daily tasks that somehow never cease no matter the hardships faced. Today feels different, though. The weight of the past few days lingers, and a subtle tension hums beneath the surface of the village's usual bustle. The absence of so many men conscripted for the manor's defenses has created a void that is impossible to ignore. Their work is vital, but the cost is clear in the dwindling harvest and the strained shoulders of those left behind. As you make your way through the village, you witness the women taking on roles that stretch beyond the traditional. They till the soil, repair fences, and haul heavy loads, their hands raw and blistered but steady. Children who once spent their days in play are now enlisted to help with chores carrying water, gathering firewood, and tending to animals. You stop by the forge where the blacksmith's apprentice has taken over in the master's absence. The apprentice's face is young and determined, sweat glistening on his brow as he hammers metal with practiced strokes. The blacksmith conscripted weeks ago left behind not just tools, but a legacy of skill that the village struggles to maintain. Nearby, the village elder discusses plans with a small group. His voice carries the weight of experience, but there's an undercurrent of worry you can't ignore. The crops this season are failing, and the threat of famine looms like a shadow over every home. You decide to visit the parish church, a place that offers both solace and scrutiny. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of incense, and flickering candles cast dancing shadows on stone walls worn smooth by centuries of prayers. The priest, a stern man with a deep voice, greets you with a nod. He speaks of faith as a shield against despair, urging the villagers to trust in divine providence despite the hardships. His sermons reinforce the church's teachings about obedience and sacrifice, framing suffering as a necessary path to salvation. Outside, the churchyard is alive with activity. Women gather to sew new vestments, and children run between the graves, their laughter a fragile thread of light in a somber world. You overhear a conversation about an upcoming feast day, a rare occasion that brings the community together for celebration and renewal. The feast day arrives with an unexpected vibrancy. Despite limited resources, the villagers prepare with care, transforming the square into a tapestry of colors and smells. Banners flutter, and the sound of lute music mingles with the chatter of friends and neighbors. Tables groan under the weight of shared dishes, hearty stews, freshly baked bread, roasted game, and sweet pies made from whatever fruits survived the cold spring. Ale flows freely, loosening tongues and lifting spirits. For a few precious hours, the burdens of labor and fear seem to lift. Stories are exchanged, songs sung, and laughter erupts, echoing through the village like a balm for weary souls. Children dart between adults' faces, bright with excitement, while elders smile knowingly at the resilience of their people. Yet, even as the festivities continue, there is an undercurrent of unease. The steward's eyes watch from the manor's edge, cold and calculating. His presence is a stark reminder that this brief reprieve is just that brief. The Lord's demands will return, and with them the harsh realities of medieval life. You think about the men at the manor, backbreaking labor and strict discipline awaiting them. You wonder how many will return unscathed, and how many will carry scars both seen and unseen. As night falls, the village settles once more into silence. The stars above blaze fiercely in the clear sky, a vast reminder of the universe's indifferent expanse. The flicker of candlelight inside each home speaks of hope, perseverance and the human spirit's unyielding fight against the darkness. You lie awake contemplating the delicate balance between hardship and celebration, fear, and faith, survival, and community. Medieval life is a tapestry woven with threads of cruelty and kindness, oppression and resilience, despair and hope. But tomorrow will bring new trials, but tonight you hold on to the warmth of shared humanity, an ember glowing stubbornly in a world where every day is a battle for survival. You wake to a morning thick with mist, the kind that muffles sound and softens the edges of the village like a worn wool blanket. The world feels quieter, but you know better silence in the Middle Ages is often the calm before the storm. Your breath forms small clouds as you step outside your hut, the chill lingering on your skin despite the slowly rising sun. The villagers move like shadows through the fog, heads bowed, shoulders hunched against the damp cold. There's a new urgency in the way they carry out their tasks. Every moment counts when the harvest is late and the Lord's taxes grow heavier. Today you'll join the women in the fields, turning soil with a wooden hoe that's more splinter than tool, and you can't help but notice the ache already forming in your back. The fields stretch before you, a patchwork of struggling crops and stubborn weeds. The soil is hard, almost unforgiving, and the few plants that have taken root are stunted and pale. You dig your hoe into the earth, the blade scraping against stubborn stones beneath the surface. The work is slow, laborious, and completely exhausting. You envy the birds soaring overhead, their freedom so effortless. Nearby, a group of women chat quietly as they work. One tells a story about a wandering minstrel who claims to heal with songs, though most dismiss it as nonsense. You catch the flicker of hope in her eyes. It's that kind of hope that keeps people going in this bleak world. The midday sun burns through the mist and you're drenched in sweat beneath your coarse linen tunic. There's no shade here, no relief except for the occasional gulp of muddy water from your leather pouch. Hygiene is a concept long forgotten in the fields. Dirt and sweat mingle freely, and lice are an unwelcome but persistent companion. As the afternoon drags on, you notice a group of men returning from the manor's construction site. Their clothes are torn and faces streaked with grime and exhaustion. One limps favoring a swollen ankle while another quietly swears under his breath about the overseer's cruelty. Historians still argue whether conscription like this was as common as stories suggest, but the palpable dread on their faces needs no scholarly debate. You hear whispers about the Lord's increasing demands, how the castle walls must be fortified against threats both real and imagined. Some villagers speculate about raids from neighboring territories, while others whisper of political maneuverings far beyond their understanding. For you, the distinctions are moot. More work means less time to care for your own land, your family, and yourself. Back in the village, the healer's hut beckons a small wooden structure, fragrant with dried herbs and strange concoctions. The village midwife, a stout woman with weathered hands, works tirelessly to tend wounds and illnesses. Today she's concocting a poultice for a man who caught a nasty infection after slipping in the muck. She tells you about her latest discovery, a mixture of garlic, honey, and nettle leaves that seems to help with fevers. It's hardly the antiseptics and antibiotics of the future, but in this time it's a precious weapon in the fight against death. The villagers cling to such remedies, often placing as much faith in superstition and prayer as in the herbs themselves. As evening approaches, the village gathers at the well, a communal lifeline that serves as both water source and social hub. You draw a bucket, the rope rough against your palms, and exchange quiet words with neighbors. Stories of lost livestock, failed crops, and whispered rumors of disease circulate alongside practical advice on how to stretch meager food supplies. Suddenly, a cry breaks the routine. A child has fallen into the river nearby, the water swift and cold. Villagers rush to the bank, hearts pounding. A quick thinking man dives in, emerging with the child sputtering but alive. Relief ripples through the crowd, mingling with renewed fears about the dangers that lurk in every corner of medieval life. Night descends like a heavy curtain, and you retreat to your humble hut. The day's labor has left you bone-tired muscles protesting with every movement. Outside the village grows quiet save for the occasional bark of a dog or the rustling of animals settling down. You light a small tallow candle, its flickering flame casting warm shadows on the earthen walls. As you lie down on your straw mattress, you reflect on the day's struggles and small victories. The Middle Ages are unrelenting, a world where every breath is a battle and every moment of rest is hard won. You close your eyes, the sounds of the village fading into a soft hum. Tomorrow promises more toil, more uncertainty, but also the faint, stubborn hope that somehow life will go on. You wake again to the damp chill of morning, your breath misting in the cool air. The village feels heavier today, burdened not just by the weather, but by the weight of unseen threats. Rumors have been spreading like wildfire whispers of sickness, sweeping through neighboring villages, an ominous shadow stalking the countryside. You can't tell how much is true and how much is fear's own invention, but it seeps into the bones of everyone you meet. You step outside your hut and immediately notice the village square looks different. A makeshift infirmary has been set up near the church, marked by crude wooden signs and straw bales. Villagers move cautiously around it, some offering help, others keeping a wary distance. The church bells toll with an unusual urgency, a signal that even the devout can't ignore. The day's work is interrupted by a steady stream of sick villagers arriving at the infirmary. You watch as the midwife and her assistants, mostly women from the village, tend to the ailing with whatever remedies they can muster. The air is thick with the smell of vinegar, herbs, and something sharper, a sour hint of decay. One man is coughing violently, his face pale and slick with sweat. The midwife presses a cloth soaked in vinegar to his chest, murmuring prayers under her breath. You overhear snippets of conversation. The plague. One whispers, and the word sends a ripple of fear through the crowd. Historians still argue whether all medieval epidemics were truly bubonic plague or a collection of different diseases, but the terror they inspired was universal. You can't help but feel your heart quicken. The idea of disease here isn't just about illness. It's about social collapse, the unraveling of everything you've worked so hard to maintain. A single cough in the wrong place can change everything. Outside the infirmary, life tries to continue its rhythm, but it's an uneven dance. Farmers tend their fields with less vigor, market stalls are quieter, and children's laughter is more cautious, more fleeting. Even the blacksmith's hammer strikes feel less certain, as if each blow could shatter the fragile calm. You find yourself drawn to the churchyard where a small crowd gathers for a funeral. The coffin is rough-hewn, the body wrapped in simple linen. The priest's voice rises in a somber chant, words meant to comfort but sounding hollow against the backdrop of loss. It's a stark reminder that death here is never far away and rarely polite. The afternoon sun struggles to break through a sky heavy with clouds casting long shadows over the village. You help a neighbor repair a broken cartwheel, the wood splintering under your hands. As you work, he shares stories of his brother taken by fever last winter, and the desperate measures they tried to save him. Garlic prayers, even a potion made from crushed beetles, methods born of hope as much as knowledge. You wonder how much of this medicine is science and how much is sheer will. Scholars still debate the effectiveness of many medieval treatments, but what's undeniable is the sheer resourcefulness people exhibited in the face of unimaginable odds. As evening falls, the village gathers again, this time in the tavern. A dark, smoky room where weary bodies find brief solace in ale and companionship. You sit by the fire nursing a cup of weak beer and listen to the stories flowing like the drink tales of knights, returning from battle, mysterious travelers, and legends of saints performing miracles. The line between fact and fiction blurs in the warm glow of the hearth. Someone jokes about how you'd probably last about a day in the plague-ridden city, and the laughter that follows is nervous but genuine. It's a momentary reprieve from fear, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humor persists. You leave the tavern to find the village cloaked in darkness, the stars obscured by thick clouds. The chill has deepened, seeping into your bones as you make your way home. The silence is broken only by the distant howl of wolves, a reminder of the wild world just beyond the village's fragile borders. As you lie down to sleep, your mind races with worries about the illness spreading the workload, piling up in the ever-watchful eyes of the Lord and his men. The Middle Ages are unforgiving, a place where every breath is a gamble and every day is a test of endurance. But as exhaustion claims you, you find a strange comfort in the resilience of those around you. Life here is brutal, yes, but it is also stubbornly persistent. And maybe, just maybe, that stubbornness is enough to carry you through another day. You wake to a sky brushed with the pale gold of dawn, a fragile promise of light that barely cuts through the lingering chill. Today the village feels oddly still, and eerie calm that presses down harder than the usual morning bustle. You sense that something beyond the usual hardships is about to tip the delicate balance of this medieval world. The morning air carries whispers of unrest. There's talk of bandits sighted near the forest edge, a shadowy threat that could turn the village's already precarious existence into chaos. The Lord's men have been riding out in small patrols, but their presence is more a symbol than a solution. You watch from your hut as a patrol gallops past their horses, kicking up dust, their faces grim beneath battered helmets. The village square, usually alive with chatter and barter, is subdued. Merchants pack their stalls with extra caution, eyes flickering nervously toward the woods. You overhear a heated debate. Some villagers argue that the Lord should raise a militia to defend the village, while others warn that such a move could provoke the bandits. The tension is palpable, and the underlying fear knits the community tighter, if only by shared anxiety. Banditry was a common medieval menace, roving gangs exploiting the lawlessness of rural areas, especially during times of war or famine. Historians still argue whether these groups were mostly desperate peasants or professional criminals, but their impact was undeniable. For a small village like yours, even a single raid could mean ruin. You decide to visit the manor's gate, where a gathering of villagers has formed. The steward, grim-faced and impatient, is delivering orders everyone capable must contribute to fortifying the village defenses. Some are assigned to mend fences, others must reinforce the gates with timber and iron. The urgency is clear, but resources are scarce, and frustration simmers beneath polite compliance. You find yourself tasked with helping shore up the eastern palisade, a job that feels both vital and Sisyphean. The wood is rough and splintered, and the nails you drive seem to bend with every blow. Sweat beads your forehead, mixing with the grime on your skin. This isn't the heroic work of knights, but the gritty, exhausting labor that keeps the village's fragile walls standing. As the day wears on, the threat of bandits hangs over every conversation. Children play near the edges of the fields, but even their games are shadowed by the stories they hear. They'll take everything one whispers to another eyes wide. You wonder how much of this is fear and how much might become reality. Meanwhile, the local blacksmith is busy crafting weapons, spears, arrows, and crude swords. His forge is a rare place of heat and fire, almost comforting amid the chill of uncertainty. You stop to watch as he hammers a blade into shape sparks flying like tiny stars. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, creation and destruction walk hand in hand. You cross paths with a midwife who shares news that the sick have increased overnight. The makeshift infirmary is now overflowing and she is running low on herbs. You offer what little you have, some dried thyme and lavender, small gestures in a growing crisis. She thanks you with tired eyes that speak volumes about the strain on her spirit. Herbs and remedies were often all villagers had against disease, though their efficacy was a mix of tradition, superstition, and occasional success. Historians still debate how much medieval medicine actually helped, versus how much it simply comforted the sick. Evening brings a gathering at the village church, where the priest offers prayers for protection and deliverance. The congregation is larger than usual faces illuminated by flickering candlelight eyes, heavy with worry but determined to hope. The church's stone walls, worn smooth by centuries, seem to hold the collective breath of the community. You listen as the priest's voice rises in chant, a steady drumbeat against the rising tide of fear. It's a fragile shield faith mingling with desperation. Some villagers clutch rosaries, others simply stand in silent resolve. The debate over religion's role in medieval life is ongoing, whether it was a source of genuine comfort or a tool of control. But today it's a beacon in the dark. Night falls thick and heavy. You lie awake, the distant hoot of an owl, a lonely sound in the stillness. The bandits could strike at any moment, or perhaps the sickness will claim another victim. The uncertainty gnaws at you, a constant companion alongside exhaustion, but there's also a strange, stubborn hope. The village's walls, though battered, still stand. The community, though weary, still pulls together. You remember the resilience you've seen, simple acts of kindness, shared meals, quiet prayers, and it steadies you. As sleep finally takes you, you wonder if you truly could last in this world, or if the next day will be the one that breaks you. You awake to the soft drizzle of rain tapping against the wooden shutters of your hut. The sky a dull gray blanket, stretching endlessly above the village. The dampness seeps through the thatch roof and chills your bones, a reminder that medieval life is not just about brute strength. It's a battle against the elements, too. Today your clothes stick uncomfortably to your skin, and the cold mud underfoot threatens to swallow your boots whole. There's no such thing as weatherproof gear here, just rough linen and wool, and the eternal hope that your fire will burn bright. The rain has slowed the usual morning chaos, but hasn't stopped it. Villagers huddle under lean-tos or rush between buildings, faces grim and hurried. The wet earth turns the narrow lanes into rivers of thick mud, and you struggle to keep your footing as you make your way to the communal barn. You're tasked with feeding the animals today. Cows, pigs, chickens, a vital job no one can afford to skip, especially in this weather. As you approach, the animals greet you with expectant sounds, lowing grunts, clucks that oddly comfort despite the damp misery. You toss hay into the troughs, your hands numb, as the wetness soaks through your gloves. The barn smells of straw manure and something sharper, a pungent reminder of nature's endless cycles. You recall that medieval farmers believed animal health was tied to everything from moon phases to spiritual balance, a fascinating mix of practical knowledge and superstition. The village's precarious food supply gnaws at everyone's mind. Harvests have been less reliable in recent years thanks to unpredictable weather and poor soil. Today you overhear farmers debating the best way to store grain safely. Rats, mold, and dampness are relentless enemies, often wiping out precious stores before winter even begins. It's said that medieval granaries sometimes included architectural tricks like raising the floor or using smoke to deter pests, but effectiveness varied wildly. You find yourself near the village well, which is now surrounded by a cluster of women washing clothes. The water runs murky tinted brown from all the rain and the inevitable runoff from fields and stables. Hygiene in the Middle Ages is a constant struggle. Baths were infrequent and often communal, with soap being a luxury most could not afford. You recall that some nobles bathed frequently, but for peasants like you, cleanliness was more a matter of survival than vanity. There's an odd medieval remedy you remember, a bizarre yet surprisingly common practice of using crocodile dung as sunscreen. Historians still argue whether this was a real practice or exaggerated myth, but it highlights how resourceful and frankly creative people could be with whatever materials they had. Your task soon calls you toward the smithy, where the blacksmith is preparing a plow. The rain has made the earth too soft for planting, so farmers need their tools sharpened and ready for when the sun returns. You watch sparks fly as the smith hammers red-hot metal against the anvil, each strike echoing like a heartbeat of the village. There's a legend in your village that the smith's hammer could ward off evil spirits, a superstitious belief mixed with respect for his skill. Tools were life, and their care a ritual, not just a chore. The blacksmith grunts as he works, oblivious to the weather outside, embodying the tireless endurance that defines medieval survival. Midday brings a welcome respite as you gather with other villagers inside the church. It's warmer here, the stone walls holding onto faint heat and the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows. The priest reads from a heavy leather-bound Bible, his voice steady and calming amid the storm outside. You notice a small group of children gathered near the altar, their faces bright with curiosity. They play a game of guessing saints based on obscure riddles, a pastime that's part education, part entertainment. Church was more than worship, it was community center, school, and sanctuary all rolled into one. Yet not all is peaceful. You overhear hushed whispers about heretics in neighboring villages, those who question the church's authority or interpret scripture differently. Such dissent was dangerous, often punished severely. Historians still argue about how widespread heresy truly was and how much was exaggerated by those in power to maintain control. After the service, you step outside to find the rain easing into a mist. The village feels quieter now, subdued by weather and worry. You walk toward the fields to check on the progress of the new seedlings, fragile shoots barely clinging to the soggy soil. Farmers gather nearby, sharing tales of bad harvests past and hopeful predictions for the future. You listen as an older man recounts a famine from decades ago, his voice low and heavy. Such memories are warnings etched deep in the collective consciousness. Evening comes with a chill that sinks into your bones as you return to your hut. Dinner is a modest stew of root vegetables and barley, simple, filling, and warming. Around you, families share similar meals, their conversations a quiet hum of resilience and routine. You lie down on your straw mattress, the dampness still clinging to your clothes and skin. Outside, the rain has stopped, and a fresh breeze rustles the leaves. The mud is drying slowly but surely, and with it, the hope that tomorrow will be a little easier. As you drift towards sleep, the thought lingers: life here is unforgiving, unpredictable, and raw. Yet somehow, despite the mud, the rain, and the endless toil, it pulses with stubborn life. You wouldn't last long without that stubbornness yourself. The dawn arrives chilly and gray, but with a certain stubbornness in the air, an unspoken challenge that the day ahead will test every ounce of your endurance. You rise from your damp bedding and prepare to face another round of medieval life's relentless grind. Today, your focus is on the village's medical realities, and you brace yourself to witness how illness and injury are managed, or rather how they're often barely managed at all. You make your way to the small hut of the village healer, a woman known for her herbal remedies and whispered incantations. Her work is part science, part superstition, part desperate hope. She's surrounded by bundles of drying herbs hanging from the rafters, mugwort, yarrow, and nettle. The pungent smell fills the room, mingling with the smoke of a small charcoal brazier. She explains in a voice both weary and steady that her knowledge is passed down through generations. But even her skill is limited by what nature and tradition provide. Medieval medicine is a patchwork of herbalism, religious faith, and what we'd now call placebo. The phrase survival of the fittest echoes in your mind again, not just a brutal truth of life, but a cruel filter that decides who lives or dies. Nearby, a man lies on a straw-strewn pallet, clutching his side where a nasty wound festers. There's no anesthesia here, no antiseptics, just bitter herbal poultices and prayers. You remember that surgery in medieval times was mostly a last resort and often performed without any form of pain relief, beyond a stiff drink of wine or ale. Amputation was common when infection took hold, though often fatal due to blood loss or subsequent gangrene. An interesting, if grim, medieval belief you recall is that the position of stars and planets affected health. Astrologers were consulted for diagnoses and treatment plans, an idea that might sound crazy today but was taken seriously by doctors and laypeople alike. Historians still argue whether astrology genuinely improved outcomes, or was just a comforting placebo in a frightening time. As you step outside, you catch the sound of children playing near the village well, their laughter a stark contrast to the suffering you just witnessed. It's a reminder of how life and death coexisted constantly in this world. You wander over to the parish church where a mass is being held for the sick and dying. The priest's voice is steady and solemn, or he intones prayers for mercy and healing. Religion and medicine are deeply entwined here, faith often seen as the best remedy. The church also serves as a hospice of sorts. There's no formal healthcare system, so the dying often spend their last days within its stone walls, tended by nuns or volunteers. The concept of hospice care as we know it didn't exist, but this rudimentary support system was vital in a world without hospitals. In a quieter corner of the village, you overhear villagers sharing remedies and warnings. One old woman swears by applying leeches to draw out bad blood, a practice surprisingly common in medieval Europe. It's messy and often dangerous, but desperate times call for desperate measures. You wince at the thought, but recognize the logic behind it. They were trying to rebalance the body's humors, a cornerstone of medieval medicine. Your afternoon is interrupted by a sudden call from the fields. A child has fallen from a cart and twisted her ankle. You rush over and find her sitting on the muddy ground, tears mixing with rain droplets on her cheeks. The village healer examines her carefully, wrapping the ankle with strips of linen soaked in herbal infusions. You're struck by how much the villagers depend on each other, and yet how precarious this dependence is. An injury that might mean a few days off work today could mean starvation tomorrow. As the sun dips lower, the village gathers once more around the fire pit in the communal square. Stories of miraculous recoveries and tragic losses fill the air, woven with laughter and tears. You listen to a tale about a knight who survived a battle wound against all odds thanks to a mysterious herb brought from the east. Such stories offer hope, but also remind you of the harsh unpredictability of medieval life. As you lay down to rest, your thoughts linger on the fragility of health in this era. There's no guarantee of recovery, no safety net beyond faith community, and a bit of luck. The thought is unsettling, yet somehow it's the reality you must accept if you hope to survive another day. You wake to a sky painted with soft hues of pink and lavender, the promise of another day cloaked in the quiet hum of the village stirring to life. Today you follow the rhythm of labor, the relentless pulse that keeps medieval communities barely afloat. From dawn until dusk, work defines existence and there's no clock. To mark your hours, only the sun's arc and the sharp commands of the manor's overseers. Your feet carry you toward the fields where you join other villagers in the backbreaking task of harvesting. The air is thick with the scent of freshly turned earth and ripe crops, but also with dust and sweat. The ground is uneven and often muddy, and the tools you wield, a wooden-handled sickle, a heavy scythe, feel clumsy compared to modern machinery, but they are all you have. The work is slow and unforgiving. Every blade of wheat cut feels like a small victory against the encroaching threat of famine. The harvest will determine the village's fate through the cold months ahead, and failure means hunger, or worse. You notice a young man nearby struggling to lift a sack heavier than himself. His face is flushed and drawn, but he presses on, driven by necessity and a fierce will to provide. It's easy to forget that behind every hard-working villager is a story of sacrifice, exhaustion, and hope. Interestingly, despite the monotony, harvest time was often peppered with moments of community bonding. Folk songs were sung to keep spirits high and coordinate movement, and sometimes informal dances broke out after the workday ended a brief rebellion against hardship. Historians still argue whether these traditions served mainly practical or social functions, or perhaps both simultaneously. As you pause to catch your breath beneath the shade of an old elm tree, your gaze drifts to a group of women weaving baskets and repairing nets nearby. Their nimble fingers remind you that medieval life was not just about brute strength, but also intricate craftsmanship. Basket weaving, spinning, and tailoring were essential skills passed from mother to daughter, each stitch weaving the fabric of community survival. You recall that medieval textiles were often made from wool or linen, and fabric was precious. The clothes you wear have been patched and mended more times than you can count, and you know every hole sewed is a story of thrift and necessity. Nearby the village blacksmith pauses his hammering to wipe sweat from his brow. His forge is alive with glowing embers and the rhythmic clang of metal on metal, a constant reminder that craftsmanship was both an art and a necessity. Without his tools and horseshoes, the village's economy would falter, yet his work is exhausting and dangerous, with burns and injuries commonplace. You overhear a tale about a smith who fashioned a sword so well balanced it was said to cut through armor like paper. Such stories, whether exaggerated or true, spark pride and reinforce the smith's critical role in village life. By midday, the sun is relentless and your back aches from bending over the fields. Hunger gnaws at your belly, but the midday meal is simple coarse bread, a chunk of cheese, and perhaps some salted pork if you're lucky. The villagers eat quickly and quietly, knowing the work won't stop. You sip from a wooden cup of ale, weak but safer than the questionable water from the well. Ale was a staple of the medieval diet, often consumed multiple times a day, providing calories and hydration. You chuckle at the thought that even children sip the mild brew, a medieval solution to avoid waterborne illnesses. After lunch, the overseer calls for everyone's attention. He hands out orders for the coming weeks, including repairs to fences, road clearing, and preparations for winter. The list feels endless, and you sense the invisible weight of exhaustion settling deeper into your bones. Yet despite the grueling work, there's a sense of shared purpose. The village's survival depends on everyone pulling their weight, a fact you both respect and resent. You think about how fragile this balance is. One bad harvest, one illness, or one misstep could unravel the whole fabric. As dusk descends, you head back to the village, the sky ablaze with orange and purple streaks. Your limbs feel heavy, but the familiar sounds of the evening dogs barking, children playing the distant church bell offer a comforting backdrop. At home, the family gathers for a modest supper. The conversation drifts to plans for the next day, gossip about the Lord's latest whims, and a few jokes to lighten the mood. It's these moments that remind you life isn't just survival, it's also community resilience and fleeting joy. As you settle down to sleep, you reflect on the endless toil of medieval labor. It's a cycle that offers little respite and demands everything. You realize that surviving a single day here requires strength, endurance, and a will hardened by necessity, and yet somehow the village endures. Dawn breaks with a pale glow filtering through your hut's thin window. The familiar sounds of roosters crowing and a gentle breeze rustling through the village awaken you. Today feels different, though. There's a sharp tension in the air that prickles your skin, a prelude to something unsettling. As you step outside, you notice groups of villagers whispering in corners, casting furtive glances toward the manor house on the hill. You soon learn why a royal messenger has arrived overnight, bearing news that could change everything. Word is spreading fast there's talk of war. The king demands levies of men and resources, and the village must contribute. Able-bodied men are to be conscripted to march to the front lines, while women, children, and the elderly prepare for harder times ahead. The proclamation comes from the manor's steward, the same wiry man with the sharp tongue who once read the new tax decree. Today his voice is heavy but resolute as he addresses the crowd in the village square. His Majesty calls for men to serve the realm. All able-bodied must present themselves to the manor by fortnight's end. Refusal will be met with severe penalty. A low murmur rises, a mix of fear, anger, and resignation. You feel it too, the weight of uncertainty pressing down thicker than the summer heat. War in medieval times is no Hollywood spectacle. It's brutal, chaotic, and often deadly long before the first sword swings. Soldiers were mostly peasants with little training, sent to fight in muddy fields with crude weapons and scant armor. The long march to battle was grueling, and disease killed more men than combat. You think about the young lads you've seen helping in the fields now, destined for this grim fate. Historians still argue whether medieval armies were as disorganized as some chronicles suggest, or if they employed more strategic planning than we give them credit for. Either way, the odds aren't in your favor. You watch as families gather their belongings, preparing for an uncertain future. Women pack simple bundles, clutching children and sewing patches into worn clothes. The village midwife shares whispered prayers and charms for protection, though faith can only go so far against the harsh realities looming ahead. Meanwhile, the lord of the manor holds a closed-door meeting with his advisors. You catch snippets of conversation words like supplies reinforcements and tax exemptions. The lord's decisions will ripple down to you in ways you can't yet fully grasp. The sense of urgency changes the village's rhythm. Fields go unharvested, fences left unrepaired. The usual lively chatter is replaced by anxious silence and hurried preparations. At the smithy, the blacksmith works overtime forging weapons and reinforcing armor, his face etched with worry. He jokes bitterly that soon he'll be making funeral gear instead of horseshoes. You wonder how the villagers will cope without the men who bring in the harvest, fix the roofs, and defend the community. The vulnerability is palpable. As dusk settles, the village feels smaller, as if shrinking under the pressure of looming conflict. You take a walk through the now quiet streets. The smell of smoke from hearth fires mingles with the scent of wet earth and crushed leaves. Children huddle close to their mothers, their wide eyes reflecting a fear they don't yet fully understand. You pass by the stocks where the boy accused of theft once sat. The wooden contraption now stands empty, but ominous, a reminder that justice here is harsh and immediate, especially in turbulent times. That night, you lie awake listening to the wind whisper through the cracks in your hut. Your mind races with thoughts of survival, not just for yourself, but for the entire village. You imagine the battlefields, the long roads leading away from home, and the quiet despair of those left behind. The stars outside seem distant and cold, indifferent to the struggles of a small village caught in the currents of history. Yet amidst this bleakness, there's a flicker of resilience. Villagers gather around fires to share stories and songs, bolstering each other's spirits. You realize that survival here isn't just about physical endurance, it's about hope, community, and the unbreakable human will. Tomorrow, the conscription begins. You brace yourself knowing that the world you've known is about to shift in ways you can't control. But for now, under the vast medieval sky, you let sleep claim you, carrying the weight of uncertainty into your dreams. The dawn light barely creeps over the horizon as you awake to the first summons for conscription. The village is already stirring, but today the usual bustle is tainted with an anxious urgency. The manor's horn sounds a deep bellow that cuts through the morning fog and calls all able-bodied men to gather in the square. You join the slow procession, hearts heavy, and eyes lowered as the crowd swelled with nervous energy. Men you've known since childhood stand beside you. Farmers, blacksmiths, carpenters, now all soldiers in waiting. You notice the uneven mix of fear and forced bravado on their faces as some exchange jokes to mask the dread. You catch a glimpse of the steward overseeing the muster clipboard, in hand barking orders with little patience. The conscription process feels chaotic. Names are called, men step forward, and some try to bargain or plead for exemptions, citing family needs or health issues. Few succeed. One man, a father of 3, breaks down quietly as he's marched away. The village watches silently, knowing that many won't return. Medieval conscription was a brutal affair, unlike the formal armies we think of today. These levies often lacked proper training and equipment, thrown into conflicts driven by distant kings and nobles. The fact that peasants had to leave their land unattended during critical planting or harvest seasons worsened the village's vulnerability. Interestingly, some historians debate the effectiveness of these levies. Were they reliable forces or simply cannon fodder? Records vary, but most agree that morale and discipline were persistent problems, often leading to disastrous outcomes. As the men assemble near the manor, you overhear discussions about the journey ahead. A long march to join a larger army gathering for an impending campaign. Food supplies are scant, and the risk of disease and desertion is high. Some joke grimly about the chances of ever seeing their homes again. Meanwhile, back in the village, the women and elders brace themselves for the coming hardships. With the men gone, they must shoulder the tasks of farming, repairing, and defending as best they can. The village midwife, once a comforting presence, now doubles as a healer and counselor, tending to both physical wounds and fraying nerves. The local priest offers a solemn blessing, invoking divine protection over the conscripts. Religion here is a balm in times of crisis, though many question whether prayers can truly shield them from the horrors ahead. You notice subtle glances exchanged, skepticism, hope, and quiet despair tangled together. Later in the day, a young boy approaches you, clutching a rough wooden sword he's carved himself. His eyes shine with determination, mixed with innocence, embodying the village's resilience. "When I grow up, I'll fight too," he declares with surprising certainty. You can't help but smile despite the heavy atmosphere. As dusk settles once again, the village feels emptier, quieter. Fires burn low, and the night air is thick with anticipation and dread. Families gather, sharing meager meals and stories. The communal bond feels stronger, a silent pact of endurance. You lie down beneath the stars, the cold night pressing in. You think of those marching away the uncertain path they tread, and those left behind standing firm in the storm? Survival here is a shared struggle, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Tomorrow promises no relief, but perhaps another chance to witness the unyielding spirit of a medieval village, holding on to hope against overwhelming odds. The chill of dawn bites at your skin as you wake again, this time to the unsettling silence of the village without its menfolk. The square is empty save for a few somber faces gathering near the well. The absence is palpable. It feels like the heartbeat of the village has slowed, leaving everything slightly off rhythm. You step outside your hut, the air heavy with a mixture of dew and unease. Women clad in practical homespun shift, busily through their doubled rolls carrying baskets heavy with vegetables tending to the animals, and repairing fences that no one else can reach. Their hands are roughened from labor, and their faces show a mix of determination and fatigue. Children wander underfoot too young to fully grasp the gravity of the moment, yet sensing the changed atmosphere. The village elder, a woman named Maud, gathers a small group to organize a watch. Though not trained as soldiers, they are determined to protect their homes from opportunistic thieves or worse, roving bandits that plague the countryside. A few brandish pitchforks and farm tools, a far cry from swords and armor, but enough to send a message that this community won't simply crumble. Historians still debate just how common bandit raids were during these times. Some records portray the countryside as a lawless nightmare, while others suggest communities often maintained relative peace through mutual aid and informal agreements. Either way, the threat feels very real today. You notice a woman sharpening a large kitchen knife on a whetstone, her eyes steely. She tells you about the rumors of a gang spotted a few miles down the road. It's a precarious situation. The village's usual protectors are miles away and the guards are thin on the ground. The midwife moves among the villagers, checking on the sick and offering herbal remedies. Her knowledge is invaluable, especially now that illness can strike without the village's usual support. You watch as she calms a trembling child, whispering reassurances even as her own worries linger behind her eyes. Amidst this flurry of activity, you glimpse the baker's wife kneading dough, her hands dusted with flour and trembling slightly. Bread is scarce and precious, and today's batch will have to stretch further than usual. Food shortages are a looming specter that haunts every household. By midday, the village buzzes with makeshift meetings. Plans are drawn up to maintain crops and livestock, distribute food, and ensure the younger boys receive some rudimentary training in case they must someday follow their fathers to war. It's a sobering sight, children clutching wooden swords and sticks, practicing footwork with more enthusiasm than skill. You recall hearing about the custom of sending the youngest sons away for apprenticeship during these years, sometimes as early as age 7 or 8. This was part practical, part social. Children learned trades and were distanced from the dangers of peasant life. Yet now, with so many men gone, the village children are forced into adult roles much sooner. Late afternoon brings a rare moment of respite. You sit by the river listening to the gentle flow of water as it carries away fallen leaves and whispered worries. Nearby, two elderly men fish with crude rods, exchanging quiet jokes about the Lord's latest decree. Their humor feels like a fragile thread holding despair at bay. As twilight descends, you join the villagers in the church for evening prayers. The flickering candlelight casts long shadows on the stone walls, and the choir's low chanting fills the air with a haunting serenity. It's a place where fear and hope mingle, and you find yourself momentarily comforted by the ritual. But as night falls, an eerie quiet settles over the village. The watch takes their posts, eyes scanning the darkened fields. Every rustle in the underbrush triggers a spike of adrenaline. Real or imagined threats loom large in the mind when the night is long and uncertain. You curl up under your thin blanket, the cold seeping through the straw mattress. Sleep is elusive, chased away by the thoughts of what tomorrow might bring. In this fragile medieval world, the absence of the men is more than physical. It shakes the very foundation of daily life, forcing everyone to adapt, endure, and survive. You realize that life here is a constant balancing act between hope and fear, strength and vulnerability. And though you might feel small and powerless, you are part of something bigger, a community that refuses to break. The morning light filters through your window softer than before, as if the world itself hesitates to start the day after the tense night. You rise and step outside, greeted by the low murmur of villagers already engaged in their daily routines, though there's a noticeable weariness in their movements. The absence of many men weighs heavily on everyone, but today carries a different sense of urgency. News has arrived from the manor. A messenger, breathless and covered in dust, rides into the village square clutching a sealed parchment. His arrival draws a crowd, and whispers ripple through the gathered people like a restless wind. The steward appears soon after, his face pale but stern, and announces the Lord's latest decree. Effective immediately, he proclaims all able-bodied men remaining in the village must prepare for conscription to the Lord's army. His words hang in the cold air like a noose tightening slowly. The few men left exchange worried glances, and the women clasp their hands tightly while the children look on with confused eyes. Conscription in medieval times was a patchwork practice varying widely between regions and lords. Some historians argue it was rarely enforced uniformly, relying instead on feudal obligations and volunteerism, while others emphasize its brutal impact on peasant communities. Either way, the threat of being drafted into conflict or forced labor on the Lord's behalf is terrifying. You overhear a woman whisper that her eldest son, barely 16, will be called away. She clutches a faded cloth doll, tightly eyes brimming with tears she dares not shed openly. Another man mutters curses under his breath, his jaw clenched in silent fury at the unfairness of it all. The village elder steps forward, raising a calming hand to quiet the growing unrest. She reminds everyone that survival depends on unity and resilience, urging the villagers to support one another through the coming storm. As the day wears on, preparations begin. The blacksmith works overtime repairing tools and fashioning simple weapons from spare iron. The scent of smoke and hot metal fills the forge, mixing oddly with the earthy smell of wet soil and livestock. Meanwhile, the midwife distributes herbal remedies and advice to calm the nerves of those left behind, reminding them that health and care are vital for the community's survival. She speaks softly of the power of plants like yarrow and chamomile, though historians still argue whether medieval herbal medicine was truly effective or more of a hopeful tradition steeped in superstition. Children gather in corners, their games subdued as reality encroaches on their innocence. You watch as a boy practices with a wooden sword, determined to be brave, though his hands shake slightly. It's hard not to feel a pang of sadness for these young souls who must face harshness far beyond their years. In the late afternoon, a group of women meets to organize a communal garden. Without the men to tend the fields, they hope to grow enough vegetables to sustain the village through the coming months. The project is a bold experiment in self-reliance and cooperation, a bright spot amid the gloom. You help plant seeds in the soft soil, feeling the cool earth crumble beneath your fingers. The task is physically demanding, but there's a quiet satisfaction in working toward a shared goal. The garden might just be the difference between hunger and survival. As dusk falls, you join a small circle gathered around a fire. The elder recounts stories of past hardships and resilience, weaving lessons of strength and hope into her narrative. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows, and for a moment the weight of the world feels lighter. You lie down later that night, the chill creeping in despite the thick blankets. Your thoughts drift between fear and determination, comforted by the knowledge that even in the darkest times human spirit persists. You awake before dawn, the world still cloaked in a heavy pre-dawn hush. The village is eerily quiet save for the occasional crowing of a rooster or the low murmur of a distant stream. Today is different. It's the day many of the able-bodied men are to leave conscripted into the Lord's army, leaving behind an already fragile village now stretched even thinner. The air carries a mix of damp earth and smoke from early fires, and the faint smell of burning wood feels oddly comforting against the uncertainty hanging over everyone. You step outside and see women gathering to distribute provisions to the families left behind: dried meats, stale bread, and small bundles of herbs. The mood is solemn but practical. Tears are swallowed and voices are kept steady. As you walk toward the village square, you notice small groups of men readying themselves for departure. Their faces are a mixture of resolve and fear. Some exchange silent goodbyes, others try to joke, though the jokes fall flat. One young man ties a worn leather pouch around his neck, a gift from his mother, hoping it will protect him. The communal well, once a bustling hub, now feels like a threshold between past and unknown futures. Medieval armies were often composed of such conscripted peasants alongside knights and professional soldiers, but the experience was brutal. Historians still argue whether conscription was a sustainable practice or simply a desperate measure that hastened the decline of rural communities. What's clear is that many never returned. The blacksmith pauses his work to offer last-minute repairs and encouragement. You hear him joke quietly. "Sharpen your wits, lads. Swords rust less than courage." A smile breaks through the tension for a moment. Near the church, a group of villagers gather for a final blessing. The parish priest, an austere figure in simple robes, intones prayers with a voice steady but low. His words promise divine protection, though you sense his own doubts. Faith is a complex comfort here, mingling hope and fear. Among the villagers left behind, a sense of responsibility grows. Women take up tasks previously done by men, tending the fields, mending clothes, and organizing food stores. You notice how this shift unsettles some, but empowers others, planting seeds for subtle social change. Yet the fear of raids or famine looms large. In the afternoon, you assist in reinforcing village defenses. The Lord's levy demanded repairs to the manor's fortifications, but now the villagers are building makeshift barriers around their homes, hoping to deter bandits or worse. The work is exhausting but necessary. You notice a group of children carving wooden swords and shields from scraps. Their play is a shadow of the grim reality, a bittersweet attempt to make sense of the violence creeping into their lives. At dusk, a feast is hastily prepared, a mixture of what little food remains. It's modest, yet the sharing of a meal together offers a momentary balm to frayed nerves. The elder toasts the courage of those leaving and the endurance of those staying, a ritual to bind the community's fractured spirit. As night deepens, you lie awake listening to the quiet sounds outside the wind, rustling through the trees, a distant owl's call, the occasional creak of the timber frames. Sleep feels fragile, a temporary respite in a world that demands vigilance. Tomorrow will bring uncertainty, and you wonder how long this village can hold together when so much is at stake. But for now, the stars shine above, indifferent yet constant, a silent reminder of the vastness beyond human troubles. The morning sun cuts through a thin veil of mist as you stir awake, the chill lingering in the air from the long night. Today feels heavier. An unspoken tension coils through the village like a low hum beneath the usual bustle. The men conscripted yesterday have gone, their absence already echoing through empty doorways and silent fields. The village feels smaller, quieter, and more exposed. As you step outside, you notice the women gathered in clusters, their voices hushed but urgent. They're organizing what little resources remain, planning work shifts to cover fields and chores abandoned overnight. The task is daunting. Fields won't tend themselves. Livestock still needs feeding, and the stores are thin. You realize survival here is a fragile balancing act, and one missing piece threatens the whole. Life in the Middle Ages was an unrelenting cycle of work and worry, and the sudden departure of so many men exposes the vulnerability of these communities. Historians still argue whether this strain accelerated the social shifts that eventually changed medieval society or merely deepened its suffering before the dawn of modern times. You head to the communal granary where a few men left behind work alongside women to inspect the stores. The grain sacks are patched and dusty, a patchwork defense against spoilage and theft. Rats scurry at the edges and you shoo them away with a stick, knowing how devastating a rodent infestation could be. Nearby, the village healer tends to a woman's aching back. Her remedies are a mix of herbs chants and tried wisdom passed down through generations. You watch as she grinds leaves into a paste, mixing in bits of honey. Despite her skill, you wonder how many ailments this ancient pharmacy can truly cure. Medicine remains a mysterious art, and even the best healer can only do so much. In the marketplace, the usual energy is subdued. Stallholders exchange quiet words, wary of making promises they can't keep. Fresh produce is scarce, and the salted fish, though plentiful, is an acquired taste. A child tugs on your sleeve, offering a crude wooden toy, perhaps a small comfort in this strained world. As midday approaches, you walk toward the fields. Without the usual number of hands, the work is slower, more desperate. You join a group hoeing the earth, the sun burning your neck. Sweat mingles with the dust, and your muscles ache more deeply than before. The land demands attention indifferent to your fatigue or fears. A sudden commotion breaks your rhythm. A band of travelers approaches the village. Their horses are weary and their clothes dusty. They carry news rumors of conflict and shifting alliances beyond your borders. The village elder listens intently, weighing their words. This glimpse of the wider world feels distant yet ominous. Later, you attend a gathering in the church. The priest speaks of perseverance, urging faith in God's plan. His words are balm and burden, offering hope, but also a reminder of humanity's small place in the grand design. The stained glass windows catch the afternoon light, casting colorful shards on the stone floor, a brief, beautiful respite. As evening falls, the village prepares for another night of uncertainty. Fires flicker in hearths, and the scent of meager stew drifts through the air. Children settle with stories of knights and dragons, their imaginations a temporary escape from harsh realities. You lie down listening to the night sounds, the distant howl of wolves, the rustle of leaves, the steady breathing of a world that turns indifferent yet unyielding. Sleep feels more precious than ever, a fragile sanctuary in the relentless tide of medieval life. Dawn creeps in, slowly filtering through the cracks in your modest hut. The morning air is crisp, carrying with it the earthy scent of damp soil and the faint aroma of burning wood from distant hearths. You pull on your rough spun tunic, the fabric coarse against your skin, and step outside to greet the day. The village stirs reluctantly like a groggy beast, waking from a restless sleep, each movement slow and deliberate. You notice the empty spaces where the conscripted men once worked. The fields are half-tended, the livestock slightly neglected. The absence is more than physical, it's a gap in the village's heart. The women, too, seem stretched thin, their faces drawn tight with exhaustion and worry. You overhear snippets of conversation, a mix of grim pragmatism and whispered fears about what's to come. The medieval household was a hive of constant labor, and losing able-bodied men meant the community had to adapt quickly. Historians still argue whether this shift contributed to the eventual loosening of rigid feudal structures or simply extended the suffering of the common folk. You wander toward the blacksmith's forge. The old man, his beard flecked with gray, is working alone now, hammering slowly at a horseshoe. He looks up and offers a tired smile, but his eyes betray the weight he carries. His apprentice left with the others, and the work piles up. Tools, weapons, and repairs all wait for hands that aren't there. Near the village well, a group of children play quietly. Their games are simpler now, tinged with the awareness that life is more fragile than before. One boy no older than 8 shows you a small wooden sword. He carved himself proud despite its crude shape. It's a reminder that even in hardship, hope finds a way to survive. By midday, you help gather firewood with a small band of villagers. The forest is a dangerous place wolves and bandits lurk, and every trip outside the safety of the village walls carries risk. The air is filled with the sharp scent of pine and the rustling of leaves overhead. You pause to listen, heart pounding, half expecting a sudden shout or the clash of steel. Returning with your bundle of sticks, you pass the village bakery where a faint smell of burnt bread hangs in the air. The baker shrugs apologetically. It seems the oven is temperamental and fuel is scarce. Meals are simpler, less frequent, and far less certain than you'd imagine in a world without supermarkets. The afternoon brings a council meeting in the manor house. The lord, a stern man cloaked in fine wool, listens to the steward's reports and villagers' pleas. You stand among the crowd, feeling the weight of their gaze, the unspoken question hanging. What will the future hold? The Lord's decisions ripple outward like stones in a pond, touching every life. Later, a wandering troubadour visits the village square. His songs are a rare treat, weaving tales of distant lands and heroic deeds. His voice carries softly on the breeze, momentarily lifting spirits. You catch yourself humming along despite the heaviness settling back as soon as his lute falls silent. As dusk approaches, the village gathers for a simple meal. The firelight flickers on faces lined with dirt and worry, but there's a spark of camaraderie and shared hardship. Stories and laughter mix with the smoky air, small acts of rebellion against the unyielding grind of medieval life. You retreat to your hut as stars blanket the sky. The cold seeps in, but you wrap yourself tightly in a woolen cloak. Outside the village quiets the sounds of the day, replaced by the gentle chorus of night. You close your eyes, letting the soft hum of the world lull you into a restless sleep, aware that tomorrow will bring more challenges, more moments, where survival feels like a victory in itself. The day begins gray and heavy, the sky swollen with thick clouds that promise rain or worse. You wake with a dull ache in your limbs, the kind that settles after days of hard labor and restless nights. Outside your rough-hewn hut, the village stirs sluggishly. Everyone seems weighed down as if the air itself presses on their shoulders. You pull your threadbare cloak tighter around you and step into the muddy streets. The usual chatter of the marketplace is subdued, replaced by hurried whispers and anxious glances toward the horizon. Word has spread fast rumors of an impending storm, one fierce enough to tear through thatch and timber alike. A heavy rainstorm in medieval times isn't just an inconvenience. It threatens crops, homes, even lives. And when the skies open up, there's little shelter to keep the worst of it at bay. The blacksmith is already at his forge, hammering with grim determination, sending sparks flying into the damp air. You wonder how he manages to keep the fire alive with all this moisture, but that's medieval resilience for you, never giving up even when the odds are stacked against you. Nearby, the villagers gather in small groups, stacking barrels and hauling sacks indoors. Women hurry to tie down their laundry and protect what food they can. Children peer nervously from behind worn curtains. The whole village feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the storm to strike. You remember that even though weather forecasting was non-existent, medieval people were keen observers of nature. The smell of ozone before a thunderstorm, the sudden hush of birds, it was all a signal to prepare. Historians still argue whether medieval communities had formal warning systems, or if they relied solely on these natural signs. But the consensus is clear. Survival often hinged on how quickly you could adapt. The first drops hit the dusty road, heavy and cold, splattering against your cloak. Within minutes, the rain thickens into a relentless downpour. You find yourself ducking beneath a low branch of an ancient oak, the only shelter for yards around. The wind howls, shaking leaves and rattling shutters on every house. The sky is a furious gray wall punctuated by bursts of lightning that flash like angry eyes. The village becomes a blur of mud and chaos. Water runs in deep rivulets along the streets, carrying refuse and small debris like a miniature river of destruction. You slip and slide, struggling to keep your footing on the slick earth. Somewhere close, the miller curses as the swollen river threatens to flood the mill pond, a vital source of grain and therefore bread. As the hours drag on, the storm shows no sign of relenting. Roofs leak, walls groan, and the smell of wet wood and earth fills your nostrils. You see a young woman struggling to secure her thatch roof, her hands raw and trembling from cold. Nearby, a group of men work together to reinforce a fragile fence, bracing it against the wind's fury. Despite the danger, there's a strange beauty in the storm's wild energy, a raw reminder of nature's power, indifferent to human suffering or struggle. You think about how medieval people saw such events as signs from God, tests of faith, or punishment for sins. Yet at the same time, the practical side of survival kicks in. You prepare, you endure, you rebuild. Toward evening, the storm begins to ease, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The village looks battered and tired. Roofs are torn. Fences lie in splinters, and many homes have soaked interiors. The livestock is restless, bleeding and stamping in muddy pens. You join a group clearing fallen branches from the main path, muscles aching, but spirits stubborn. The villagers share grim smiles and unspoken acknowledgement that this too shall pass, though the cost might be high. The local priest walks among the people, offering blessings and comfort, reminding everyone that endurance is a form of grace. You notice how his words bring a flicker of hope, even as the reality remains harsh. Religion here is a double-edged sword, a source of solace and a demand for submission. As night falls, the village gathers in the hall, by the fire trading stories of storms past and lessons learned. The elder speaks slowly, his voice steady despite the exhaustion around him. He tells of time when worse tempests tore through this land, yet the people survived by standing together. The fire crackles shadows, dancing on the stone walls, and you feel the weight of centuries in this room. The stories, the struggles, the resilience. It's a rare moment of warmth and community amid the unforgiving world outside. You lie down on a simple pallet, exhausted beyond measure, and as your eyes close, you carry a flicker of hope that tomorrow will bring repair and renewal, not ruin. Morning arrives soft and tentative, as if the earth itself is cautious about waking. The storm has passed, leaving a trail of destruction, but also a strange calm. The village, though battered, stands resilient like an old warrior catching its breath after a hard fight. You step outside and immediately notice the changed landscape. The fields are sodden puddles, mirror the gray sky, and the smell of wet earth is thick and sweet. Mud clings to your boots, heavier than usual, dragging with every step. The villagers are already at work, eyes bright with determination despite the fatigue etched into their faces. You see women hauling buckets of water to rinse away the grime, men repairing fences and propping up sagging walls. Children cautiously play in the puddles, their laughter a fragile thread tying the village back to normalcy. You help the miller clear debris from the water wheel, a task vital for grinding grain and keeping food on the table. The miller grumbles about how the river likes to remind us who's really in charge, but his smile betrays his pride in the village's stubborn spirit. Historians still argue whether medieval disaster recovery was driven more by the Lord's command or the communal efforts of peasants. In your experience here, it's clear the villagers rely heavily on each other. Authority exists, but survival depends on solidarity. Later, you join the priest in the church. The stained glass windows catch the weak sunlight, casting kaleidoscopes of color on the stone floor. The priest leads a quiet service, his voice calm and steady as he prays for healing and protection. The villagers gather, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight, some whispering their own hopes and fears. The church is more than a place of worship, it's the village's spiritual anchor. Yet faith here is complex. It comforts, yes, but also demands obedience, and instills fear of divine punishment. This duality shapes much of medieval life. As afternoon slides by, you wander through the village, observing the gradual return of life's rhythm. The blacksmith's hammer rings out once more, steady and reassuring. Market stalls reappear, though goods are sparse and weathered. The baker pulls fresh bread from the oven, its warm aroma, a balm to weary souls. You find a moment by the old oak tree where the village elder tells tales of storms past. His voice is soft but firm, weaving history and legend into a tapestry that connects generations. He reminds you how this land has endured floods, famines, and wars, and how every scar tells a story of survival. Night falls gently with a cool breeze carrying the scent of wet wood and herbs. The village settles into a hush, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl and the soft murmur of voices, sharing final stories by firesides. You lie down, muscles sore but heart full. The stars overhead are brighter than you've ever seen, reminding you of the vastness of the world beyond this small patch of earth. You breathe deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of the village's heartbeat beneath you. Despite the hardships, there is a quiet peace here, a fragile balance between struggle and hope. You drift toward sleep with the knowledge that though the Middle Ages are harsh and unyielding, they are also alive with courage, resilience, and a deeply human spirit. Let your breath slow, your thoughts soften, and the gentle night carry you away. The night deepens, folding the village into darkness like a heavy woolen cloak. Outside, the cold air slips silently through cracks in wooden shutters and curls around chimney stacks, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and earth. Inside your humble dwelling, the soft flicker of a dying candle casts long shadows that dance across the rough-hewn walls, revealing glimpses of a life forged by necessity and grit. You lie back on your straw mattress, your body aching from the relentless toil of the day, the sting of cold and rain still clinging stubbornly to your skin. The weight of the world outside your hut feels distant, now softened by the quiet that comes with night. Here, in this fragile moment between wakefulness and sleep, the harsh realities of medieval life fade into a quiet hum, like the distant echo of the village's heartbeat. Your thoughts drift slowly, wandering through the scenes of the day, the pounding rain that turned fields to rivers, the determined faces of neighbors who refuse to give in to despair, the steady rhythm of the blacksmith's hammer, and the prayers whispered softly in the dim church. Each memory is a thread woven into the fabric of this place, a tapestry of resilience stitched together by countless souls before you. Despite the relentless hardships, the unyielding demands of the land, the ever-present shadow of disease and death, the strict grip of authority, there is something enduring here. A spirit that refuses to be broken. A quiet courage that pulses beneath the mud and stone, beneath the thatch and timber. This spirit is the heartbeat of the village, the true force that sustains life against all odds. Outside, the stars blaze cold and distant pinpricks of light that have witnessed generations come and go. Their steady glow is a reminder that the universe is vast, indifferent, and eternal, while your life, though fleeting, is part of an unbroken chain, stretching back through time. It's humbling and strangely comforting to know that like those who lived centuries before you, are a small but vital part of something far greater. The wind sighs softly through the trees, a lullaby of nature itself, as if to cradle the village in a protective embrace. Somewhere nearby, a dog's low bark breaks the silence, a reminder that life in all its messy, complicated glory continues. The faint rustle of animals settling down for the night blends with the distant hoot of an owl calling out into the darkness as a guardian of the night. In this stillness, you find a rare peace, a moment to breathe, without fear, without hunger, without the weight of endless labor. The world outside may be brutal and unforgiving, but here in the sanctuary of night, there is room for rest, for hope, for dreams. And what do the villagers dream of, you wonder? Perhaps of better harvests or the laughter of children free from worry. Maybe of warmth and safety, or simply the return of the sun after a long, cold winter. Their dreams are the same as yours for a life a little kinder, a little freer, a little more certain. You close your eyes and let the quiet wash over you, each breath slower, deeper as the night carries you towards sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, no doubt another dawn filled with toil and uncertainty. But for now, you are wrapped in the soft embrace of night, resting in the shadows of the Middle Ages, part of a story that has endured through centuries. Sleep comes gently, and with it the promise of renewal,